Hey, this is John. Welcome back to Modern Old School Developer. In this episode, we're going to continue working on the backend. I want to make an endpoint that can take files from your hard drive and import them into our database as movie files. So let's see if we can make that happen. The first thing I want to do is set up a new file called config.py because I want a configuration file that's loaded on start that tells us where all of our files are. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy over this function. This is a function decorator, and what it allows us to do is make a function run once and only once. So I want to be able to read my config file and return the data from that config file, but I don't want to keep loading the config file and reading it over and over again. So although it's not super important in this application, I like the idea of not rereading your config file all the time. So we're going to use this little decorator. And then we're going to say run once. And then we're going to say, we're going to define the function getConfig. And it's going to return a dictionary with keys that are strings and values that are strings. Okay, so let's see here. I want to get a path to my config file. So the path is going to be in the environment, and I'm going to call it Movie Manager Config Path. And if we don't have that, we're going to supply a default value. So we'll say default config path. And I will define that up here, default config path, and I'm using capitals to signify it's a constant, even though Python doesn't really have those. And we'll say that it's in the same directory you run from under config.yaml. All right, what else do we have? So I want to be able to read that YAML file. So let's import YAML. That's from the PyYAML Python package. So we're going to try, because this may error out, with open path for reading as file. We're going to use a with context. We will say data equals YAML.safe_load, and we will load the file. Now, if there are any exceptions, so if it's not valid YAML, or we can't read the file, or we can't find the file, whatever those are, we're just going to bail out right here. So let's give the user a little message telling them why we didn't do anything. So we will make an F string. We failed to read the config file at the path. File equals sys standard error. So we will print this to the standard error. All right, what else do we have? And then at the very end, if we got all the way here, I assume we have our config data. We can simply return that. All right, so now I need to make the actual config file in the backend directory. So we're going to put triple dashes here to define the YAML file. We're going to have three keys in here. There's going to be the path to the import files, the path to the movie files, and a path to our category directory where we'll have categories that we can sort files into later on. There might be movies and series as well, but for now I'm just going to do categories. That's what I have my dummy at, but I think it'd be better if we had actors and series and whatnot as well. So we'll work on that a little bit later. But for start, I want the imports, and that is going to be a path. So we will say it is going to be in the parent directory under the movies folder under imports. So there is where you will find the import files. The movie files are going to be in movies, I don't know. Maybe we'll call this database. So database imports, database movies, and categories, DB categories. I'll even go ahead and make the actors paths too, and the series path, and the studios path. All right. There we go. There are all of our keys. So, yeah, let's see what we can do with that. So now that we have our config file and our config thing here, let's go make sure we actually read our config file and get our data. So we'll go into main, And let's just go ahead and get our configuration. So we'll say config equals, let's see here, from dot config import get config. Config equals get config. And then we will just print the config data and see what happens. So if I go to my terminal, back to not you. I guess it's not running right now. That's fine. Let's go to our backend. We're going to run uvcorn movemanager.main:app --reload. So there we go. We have our config file. It was able to read it and process it. And now we have a Python dictionary of all of our values. Cool. That's a good thing for that. So we can go ahead and stop printing the config. I will leave this here just to make sure that on start we can always read our thing. If we couldn't, no point in starting the application. So we'll just put it at the top, in fact. All right, so now we know that we won't start our application unless we're able to read our config file. All right, so what's the next step? Now that we have those paths, how are we going to import them into our database? All right, so let's go make some fake movie files to import. So in our backend, in our config file, that's where we would run our application. So we said that the path would be up one directory in the DB folder, and then we'd have movies and imports. So imports are where all of our movies are going to come from. So let's make some fake movie files in here. So we'll touch some movie files. Little mermaid.mp4, touch Beauty and the Beast mp4. We'll make Lion King mp4, Aladdin mp4. What else is there in the Disney catalog? Iron Man. That's different, but whatever. Bugs Life. Toy Story. That's good. Just for a test. So basically, here are the movie files that we might have, we want to sort and keep track of on our hard drive. We'll put them in this folder, and the idea of the endpoint we want to make is that it will move the import files over to the movies folder and add them to our database. So let's see if we can get it to do that. So for starters, we want to add a new endpoint. So what are we going to call this endpoint? Maybe import movies? app.get/import movies. That's what we'll call it for now. Let's see what we can do about that. So we will define import movies. And what is this actually going to do? Well, what we want to do is we want to read the folder, that file folder we have, and then we want to add all of those as movies to our database. So let's see what we can do to make that happen. All right, first thing I want to do is make a new module in here. I will call that util.py, so where all our utilities are going to live. And we're going to make a new function that will let us list files in a directory. So we're going to do list files and take a path, that's a string, and we're going to return a list of strings. And let's import list. There we go. So that should be from typing. All right. So we want to try, and we're going to get files, and I want them to be sorted. So we're going to sorted os.list directory path. So let's import os. And the exception, let's see, do I really want to, I think we'll catch this exception. We'll raise a new exception, and we're going to say unable to read path. Okay, so otherwise we will return files, and that is what we're going to do. So if for some reason we can't list the directory, we will raise an exception, and if not, we'll be okay. So there we go. There are our files. So we're going to try to do that. So from.util import list files, not list files. And then we're going to get the files. So we're going to try files equal list files. And the path is going to be the config imports. All right. Except, and if we have an exception, what we're going to do on an exception, we're going to raise a new exception, I think. So we can raise an HTTP exception. This is from FastAPI. And we're going to say the status is an HTTP. Let's import that first real quick. So from FastAPI, we can import status. And then from FastAPI.exceptions, we can import HTTP exception. All right, so this should be HTTP 500 internal server error. All right. And then we need to give it a message, I think should just be our error message. So yeah, we're going to have a detail, and the detail is going to be message is going to be the exception converted to exception as E, and we'll do that. So if for some reason we can't read the file, we'll return an HTTP 500 internal server error. All right, if we could read the file, we're going to make a list of movies. So let's start by doing that. So for file in files, do something, I don't know what. We're going to need to, I would like to split the extension from the file. So name equals split extension file. And I think split extension comes from the OS module. Yeah, from os.path. From os.path import split extension. So now I want to get a new movie, and that's going to be in our database actions. So we're going to call that CRUD for create, remove, update, delete. That's the CRUD thing. And we're going to say we're going to add a movie, and the movie is going to be added to our database. We're going to add it with the file, which is what we're doing right now, and the name. That will be the name of the movie. So we'll have that. And then we'll say if movie is not none, we will do movies.append movie. That seems right. And then we are going to return the movies. All right. So a lot of stuff there. Doesn't make much sense yet. We have to make some of this work. So let's start off by getting our database. So we need to set up a function that will allow us to have a database session every time one of our paths gets called. So let's set that up first. Let's set this function up right at the top here. We're going to define get database. The database equals session local. We're going to try to yield the database. And when we are done or something bad happens, we will do a close on the database. There we go. So now we can get a database session for any of our routes. So if we want to use a database session, we need to put that into our function here. So our import clips function, we are going to have database, which is a session, and that is depends on get database. So depends is, I don't know how to explain it exactly. Let's make sure we import session from SQLalchemy.orm. So yeah, so this whole depends thing, this is a helper in FastAPI that sets up a dependency chain. So before this route will get called, we will make sure we have a database session. And if we don't, this route's going to fail without doing anything. So we'll get a server error at that point. All right, so the last thing to do is to actually make the movie. So we're going to need to set up this CRUD module. All right, so the first thing we're going to do in this CRUD module is define that add movie function. So define add movie. So we're going to have a lot of things in here. The database is going to be a session. We're going to have a file name, which is going to be a string. We're going to have a name for the movie, which will be a string. We're going to have a studio ID, and that is optional. That's going to be none. We'll have a series ID, an optional integer, which will be none by default. We'll have a series number, again, an optional integer, which is going to be none. We will have the actors that are in this, which is going to be an optional list of integers. So I guess means this is actor IDs. Then there's going to be category IDs, optional list integers equals none, and processed, which is optional Boolean, which equals false by default. So let's import some things from, go away caps lock, from SQLAlchemy.orm import session, from typing import optional, and list. Okay, that should be all of those things. And this is going to return a models.clip. So let's import .models. And so it's going to return a model clip. So in our model, if we've got that's not right, it's a models.movie. Okay, so in our model, we've got this movie class, and that's what we're going to return from our database action. So let's go ahead and make this function. And let's see what we can do. So the first thing we need to do is make a movie object. So let's do movie equal models.movie. We're going to say file name equals file name equals name, studio ID equals studio ID, series ID, series ID, series number is series number, processed equal processed. All right. Actually, it might be okay. So what I want to say is if actor IDs is not none, then we can say movie.actors equals actor IDs. And same thing for categories. If category IDs is not none, then movie categories equals category IDs. Okay, so now we're going to try to add this to our database. So we put this in a try block. We'll do database.add movie, database commit, database refresh on the movie, and we will accept integrity error, and we'll roll back if that happens. And at that point, we'll return none. Otherwise, we are going to return the clip. Not the clip, the movie. Integrity error is probably from SQL Alchemy somewhere. Yeah, so it's from SQLAlchemy.exe exceptions. So that looks pretty good to me. The one thing we didn't do is move the file on the hard drive, but I think we'll come back to that because that's... let's go ahead and do it. Why not? Util migrate file, I think we need to add. So I'm going to copy this from my existing one. Okay, so let's see here. First of all, in utilities, I want the config. So from.config import get config, and I want config to be available to anything in this module. Okay, so this is supposed to be a clip. There is no such thing as a clip, so let's say from .import models. This is going to be a models.movie. We don't have the logger right now, so we'll just comment that out for the time being. Okay, so real quick, here's what's happening. So we've got this migrate file function. It takes, it should be a movie, not a clip. It takes a movie, which is a database movie, and it takes a Boolean on whether we're adding the file or removing it. We'll see why that will be important in another video, but it'll be important later on. So the current base path is imports if we're adding, otherwise it's the files path. Is that what I call that? Did I change the name of that? I did, I call it movies now. Gotta fix that real quick. So instead of files, it should be movies. Okay, so otherwise it's the movies path, and same thing for the new one. It's either movies if we're adding, or it's imports. So we build our current path, which is wherever it is currently with the file name, and our new path is the new base with the movie file name. So we can move these back and forth between the import and the movie folders. And that'll be useful later on, but right now what's useful is moving it from imports into the movies folder. And then all we do is rename this right here. So yeah, that's good. And then over in our CRUD thing, we're going to do migrate file. I need to import util. Migrate file, and it's going to be the movie. Okay, so I believe that is everything. One more real quick thing we need to do is we need to define the return value of this function. So we need to make another module in here. This is going to be schemas.python. So this is what the data looks like that we're returning. So we can complement FastAPI and SQL Alchemy to make this work together. So let's try that out. All right, so let's start out by defining a new class. This is a movie base, and it's going to be based on the base model. This is a Pydantic thing. So we need to, from Pydantic, import base model. Okay, so every movie is going to include an ID, which is an integer, and a file name, which is a string. Did I spell that right? No, I didn't. A file name, which is a string. Then we're going to have the actual movie itself, which extends movie base. And this is going to have a lot of things. So it's going to have a name property. It is an optional string, which might be none. Let's import optional there. We have actors, which is an optional list of actors, which we haven't defined yet, but we will in a minute. All right, there are categories, which is an optional list of categories. Again, we haven't defined that yet, but we will. Series is going to be an optional series, which might be none. Series number is an optional integer, which will be none. And studio is an optional studio, which is going to be none. Finally, to make this compatible with the SQL Alchemy stuff that we're doing, we need to add a class called config, and in here we set ORM mode equal to true. All right, so now we need to find the actor, category, series, and studio classes, and they are pretty much all the same. So let's go look at that real quick. I need to make a class actor, which is a base model, and these are all the same. They all have an ID, and they all have a name. That's what they are. And because they are SQL Alchemy models, we set the ORM mode to be true. This is what allows you to mix the models we get from our database with the schema models we're using from Pydantic. I'm not sure if I can do this. I'm going to try this real quick. If I make a thing called movie data, which is the base model, which has an ID integer and a name string, and a class config of ORM mode being true, I wonder if I can do all of that and just do pass everywhere else. That would be a lot less code to put in there. We'll try that and see what happens. So there we are. Those are our schemas. So why did I define all of those schemas? It's so I can tell it what the return type of this value is going to be. Okay. So when I am importing my movies, we need to get a response model, and our response model is going to be a list of schemas.movie. And let's import schemas.movie. So schemas, plural. And we need to import typing from typing import list. Okay. I think that should be all good. So, wow, that's a lot. Okay. Hey, it's still running. I'm actually a little surprised. Let's see if it actually works. So let's take a look real quick. We have our imports and we have our movies. Let's see what happens when we go to here. We'll go to our docs. We've got our new get import movies. If I try it out and execute it, what happens? Hey, we have a response body. We have an ID of 1, Aladdin. Beauty and the Beast, A Bug's Life, Iron Man, etc., etc. So it looks like we've imported those things. Hey, and they're all in movies now and not in the imports folder. Hey, that's pretty cool. If we go into SQLite, look at tables, select star from movies, looky there, we actually have movies in our database. All right, this video ran kind of long, sorry about that, but I hope you have learned something about SQL Alchemy and FastAPI and integrations and all those things. And if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, help us grow. I'd appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.